I think really as we go into 2025 and 2026, the advanced therapy sector should really be thinking about what are the therapies, what are the unique, amazing, life-changing or life-saving therapies that we can develop. And it should really be a case of sitting down thinking, what is this therapy? Where does it fit in with small and large molecules? What value does it add to patients? How reasonable or simple is it to administer? And how do I keep the cost of goods as manageable as possible whilst still generating very high social and medical benefits for patients? So it's about having a highly efficacious product, but one that we know where it fits. So I think it's about cell and gene therapy developers raising their heads up, looking around what else is out there, and stop sort of thinking how great we are and think about where do we fit within the environment. So I think 2025 is the year of almost growing up into the wider medical environment.
I think there's a lot of open questions right now around CGT. Everybody's having to operate in a very lean manner because of the financial situation. So I think a lot of question marks are raised around how are we manufacturing? How could we do this in a more streamlined and efficient way? We've seen a lot of companies merging and acting in a more collaborative manner. So I would like to see a focus on collaborative initiatives, a look to the future for sustainability for our CGT products, and kind of more initiatives, so more innovations coming through, but coming through with the support of larger pharma.
Yeah, I think that there's different aspects. Probably the most important one is we're all doing product focused work, right? Whatever we say, it's the product. And I was talking about making sure we launch it well, but should develop it well. And everything is subsidiary to make the right product for the right patient. And one element, and I go back to hopefully see improvement on that continuing into next year, is the fact that there is more willingness to invest, more ability for us to have the fuel that keeps us going, which is the money and the investment, public and private, that keeps us developing the product. So make sure that we have in place what it takes to develop the product and focus our activity on successful product development.
So I think the priorities are going to be lying around patient access. So now that we've gone through a phase of a lot of approvals, and now we're at that point of making sure that those therapies can really be accessible to patients. And part of the challenge with that is really the whole infrastructure around delivering these therapies. So it's very challenging, it's very expensive. It requires a lot of infrastructure, logistics, manufacturing facilities. So I think that's really going to be a lot of the industry's focus is around really now getting these therapies to patients, and not only in the UK and in America, but in the developing world as well. And I think one of the trends that could really help with that is the kind of move, or some people's move, towards a more in vivo cell therapies, that really, if you can really only be delivering a vector somewhere and then basically treating the patient in vivo, that has huge ramifications for the infrastructure that's required for patient access.
I think for 2025, the priorities still remain around reducing cost of goods, increasing efficiencies, scaling treatments. Treatments need to make their way to the patients. There's a real push to fail fast at the early stage when you're going to first in human. That's admirable because it saves your cash burn, but you really need to start with a manufacturing process that is amenable to scalability. You do not really want to be looking at that process at phase 2 or phase 3 and going, we need to go back to the drawing board and redesign this whole thing because it's not scalable for a commercial launch. So building that in from the start, I think, is going to be critical.
Think about the viability from financial perspective about the therapies and the companies. So learn from other industries and try to harness it within our industry, how we can come with the innovation. And innovation is great, science is great, especially in this industry which saves people's lives. But how we can make it to a viable business. And I believe that we need to really think about it from inception, not later on. There's no later on. You don't do it, it's very difficult to do it later.
I'm quite biased, but I think the priorities for the sector should be to kind of focus on that emerging technologies, emerging talent, there could be seen as being a bit of a kind of dearth of translation from the early stuff that happens at places like Imperial to industry. And I think there's a certain amount of kind of priority that needs to be given to promote that translation or that kind of connection between industry and academia. I guess kind of like mimicking really other successful ecosystems like the US, where I think academics are more savvy, but I think also industry experts are way more conscious that, academia and institutional R&D is a place where you can really tap into and leverage to promote business.
I think that the priorities, they are to moving towards commercialization more and more. I mean, obviously during these years, the field has been growing in terms of new developments, even early clinical trials starting and so on. But now what we are going to see is more and more approvals coming. This is something that will be key for the field in the coming years.
I think the key priority for the sector in 2025 should really be around cost efficiency and, as ever, regulatory alignment. Ultimately, these two things are going to drive these medicines forward, and they can directly address the current bottleneck in, commercialization and some of the bottlenecks around supply chains, etc.
Continuous improvement, process improvement, learn how to debottleneck your manufacture, serious focus on industrialization, end-to-end thinking. I see a very strong disconnect from patient access versus manufacturing. So you compare the amount of patients that benefited from CAR T cell therapies in 10 years, which is around 36,000, and amount of patients who died in 2024 because of blood cancer, which is upwards of 700,000, that could potentially have benefited from CAR T cell therapies in blood cancer. There is a huge gap between the 36,000 to 700,000, right? So we have to do much more there. And I believe it's a combination between industrialization and then understanding the gaps between these manufacturers when they are ready from manufacturing and being able to reach patients.
The priorities for the CGT industry should and will be in the manufacturability. We're discussing centralized versus decentralized, but also how can we reduce the manufacturing costs? We see a lot of new technology popping up, and this is going into the right direction, but a lot of work has to be done and to be validated here.
It's a great question, and one that was addressed during one of the panel sessions surrounding how we're remedying the gap in skills and educating our workforce. And I think it really comes down to the balance between innovation and standardization. So we've got a significant amount of innovation in the field, and it really drives the science and it drives the motivation to continue to be better. But at some point, we need to say, okay, this is where we're going to sit for our standardization or a semblance of standardization, and we're going to move forward now. We're going to go to the next step. So I think I did hear some of that in some of the talks that, oh, the innovation, the innovation, the innovation. But hey, hang on, when do we go to the next step? Where's the standardization? So I was really pleased about that because I think it's something that's been lacking in the past, and it's making everyone aware that, hey, we need to make sure we get to the finish line. So keeping the eye on the prize.
As we know, we have made tremendous advancements in the cell therapy space in a very short time. And cell therapies, by being curative in nature, have shifted the dynamics of what the patients will get in terms of therapy. The challenge has been accessibility to the therapies, and there have been many discussions focused on it. So how do we make these life-changing therapies available to a larger group of patients, whether it is autologous therapies or off-the-shelf allogenic therapies? I think that has been a subject of discussion, and I do believe that that should be staying in focus for the rest of 2025. And accessibility is a complex subject. It's not just the geographical location where the patient may reside and therefore doesn't have the means to travel to big hospitals. It also means managing the cost of goods and making manufacturing cheaper. It also means standardization, whether it's in the manufacturing space, whether it's in the advanced analytics space, or it's in the regulatory space. I do believe that the regulatory agencies are realizing the importance of improving accessibility to these therapies for patients because there is a big initiative by the FDA to bring all of the regulatory agencies together. It's called Cogent, and that is going to help standardize some aspects of review process and accelerate the therapies.